Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selvey, and today we're going to go over the redraft ADPs that we love, guys that are just kind of undervalued right now. It's still early. I mean that it's okay. Like we know that you're going to start drafting, the 21st or 24th and 31st of this month. Those two Saturdays are the big ones, but including ours, we'll have our draft on the 31st. But we know that, you want to get ahead of those things. You want to see what guys are going a little bit too low, little undervalued, and we have them.
Yeah, I mean, we did a ADP's love and hate for best ball, but it's entirely a different animal on these platforms because you're actually making start sit decisions, you're getting waiver wires, you're doing all this stuff. So you're it's not just like a Devon Achane is a perfect example of a redraft versus a best ball player because I don't know from a week to week basis if he's going to have a weekly floor of 15 to 17 points that you need to invest a second round pick in him. But I know he's going to have three, maybe even 4, 5, 30, 25, 30 point games, which is why his upside is so high. And his ADP reflects that on, redraft leagues because now he's a third or fourth rounder compared to being on here. And then also mid round running backs, usually it's kind of flipped where in best ball, you're starting through receivers. Um, it's usually better to attack, get 4 or 5, in the first 8, 9 rounds. Well, in redraft, a lot of people have kind of transitioned to a double flex or just two starting wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's less commitment needed for that position. And in turn, running back is kind of vaulted up. So these mid-tier running backs, which is going to reflect in our ADP videos because there's a lot of receivers we love and not many running backs we love. And then it's vice versa on the hates.
Right.
So, we'll start and get right into it. Essentially, this whole grouping is rookies. Basically, the ADPs haven't reflected and adjusted to production that we can expect from some of these guys. And, there's a lot of like 3 to 4 round differences in ADP from best ball to redraft. I mean, best ball, obviously, they're sharper drafts because everybody pays money to do these drafts. Whereas, on Yahoo, ESPN, people pick for 3 picks and then leave, and then it's computer drafting just best available. So it's harder for these to reflect. But I mean, you got just perfect example. Lad McConkey is going in the 7th round on both DraftKings and Underdog, whereas in redraft, 112, 110,
Right.
88 on Sleeper, which Sleeper is probably the best in terms of updating ADP. Like Yahoo, in the last 4 weeks has not updated their ADP. So, which, people could be making decisions that, reflect that, but they used to be more active and proactive about, switching those up. But even ESPN, who is better at that, he's still out of the top 100. So you're
Right.
getting him as a wide receiver 5 or even 6 compared to investing a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. It's a big difference for somebody that's kind of has a volatile. You might have to be patient with him, especially, Justin Herbert now having a foot injury and you just don't know upside wise. It's kind of perfect. And that's why it's great for all these stackable options.
Right. And if you just look at these 5 receivers like that are on the board, like most of them, Keon Coleman walking into a ton of targets is what we expect because everybody, what is the crazy number of their targets that are gone?
It's like north of 50.
Yeah, 50 something percent. So Keon Coleman walking in for target share. Xavier Worthy is just another guy on the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion, but it's the Kansas City Chiefs. So there's your opportunity cost right there. Lad, like you said, he's in one of the worst receiving cores in football, similar to Keon. Brian Thomas Jr., he replaces the production of Calvin Ridley, which is, of course, a tall task. But either way, like
the difference is Calvin Ridley was going 3rd and even 2nd round last year at the very end of drafts, and now you get him in the 8th round.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's way less, I guess, need.
Yeah, because Christian Kirk was still going in the 50s last year.
Yeah.
Or 50s or 60s last year. So he's around the same. Yeah. So you're not, the discount is on Brian Thomas. And that was in best ball. He's even lower in redraft. And then Xavier Legette is another guy that we just keep getting. He's possibly the number 2 in the Carolina offense. If he becomes the number one, you're going to be very happy because we've seen CJ Stroud support a number one in Adam Thielen last year, even knowing we didn't know that Adam Thielen was going to be good. CJ Stroud kind of just wanted to get him the ball as much as possible. So it's possible. It's possible for all five of these guys to be, big breakouts, and you're getting them at basically dirt, which is the cool part.
I mean, even with just to add a little bit to Xavier Legette, he is basically undrafted on ESPN and Yahoo. I have one Yahoo league that I've done so far. He is 23% owned just throughout all Yahoo leagues right now. And Kamani Vidal, another person we were high on, well, he's going outside the first 15 rounds. It reflects that in his ADP, and he is way, way further down. He might be around 10 to 12%, which that could change, but nothing's really coming out that he's really taken over the one yet. But he's the perfect. Patience is a virtue. You don't need to rely on him. I think it's actually even better in redraft leagues if you have a deep bench because you can just have him sit for 9 weeks and then, JK's down again. Gus Edwards down again. 25 touches right there. And then also for those that do keeper leagues, it's all even more important because you're looking for guys that next year you can just place in the 10th, 12th rounds in your, best ball drafts, wherever you drafted previously. And you know that they're going to rise because all of these guys next year will be much further up than where their current ADP is now in redraft.
Right.
So it's even more important. And guys like Isaiah Pacheco a couple of years ago, which he could take over the one role. He was similar to Kamani Vidal in that regard. He was going late, and or even undrafted. And then I have a couple friends that have him and keep getting to keep him in the 9th round. And he's now has the 2nd round ADP in redraft leagues right now. So that's kind of another aspect and why we love these guys so much. A couple guys that we did omit was, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Roma Dunze. It's not like they're terrible ADPs, but they're just much closer to where we have them. Marvin Harrison, we've talked about, we haven't gotten as much as we'd want in best ball because he's exactly where we have him.
Right.
Well, he's a little bit lower in Yahoo, but you still got to take a 2nd round pick on him. Malik Neighbors is much more favorable. We've been talking down on him and have not drafted him at all. Well, much more reasonable now, but it's still not worth mentioning. And then Roma Dunze is actually in the 6th, 7th round. So it's kind of like he's right where, he should be as well.
Right. And then the last two, you got Marshawn Lloyd up there. He's just he's been a little injured and beat up in Green Bay practice, but he should be the backup to Josh Jacobs. We've seen injuries to Josh Jacobs last year. And then Brock Bowers, he's just a guy we can't get enough of, and he is tight end 15 on some sites while we have him at tight end 7. So
yeah, Yahoo is completely out of their minds for putting him to. I know that it's not completely updated, but to start him at 132 is absolutely ridiculous. I understand it's half PPR, but there's no reason he shouldn't be in the top 100. He's barely in that in best ball, and on 2 platforms of redraft, the most popular ones, he's not even there. Sleeper is much more respectable at 78. We're still a little higher on him from that, but that's just kind of like a tidbit. We've talked about him all summer. We don't want to just kind of go all in again on him, but he's reflecting just like those other guys.
Yeah. And then the next guy on our list that's not a rookie is Chase Brown. Been the starter in camp, 11 on 11s. You've seen him make big plays. He played last year for this team, but didn't get as many opportunities with Joe Mixon still there. Now they bring in Zach Moss, and it didn't feel like Zach Moss should be the starter necessarily. But you can see on the board, if you just look at the running back rankings, we have him 9 spots above everybody else. And then on the regular rankings, 6 spots against Yahoo, but everybody else we're way ahead of. We update, of course, as quick as possible. So we know that training camp is going on, and hopefully these other sites will catch up.
Yeah, we were already kind of taking some shares, but we're all in now on Chase Brown. We've officially passed him, or, moved him above Zach Moss, and we're just completely in with him being a 15 to 17 touch a game, which is completely fair and reasonable. But being efficient with those touches, I mean, Cincinnati just let go of Joe Mixon again. For about 5 to 7 years, he had north of 300 touches or opportunities. That's vacant. And Zach Moss, he had a good month stretch, and that's why by default he started as the preseason starter and his ADP was in the 90s. Well,
Right.
Chase Brown has been running mostly with the ones, and he's had great breakout plays. He's going viral on X, and his ADP will not stay there. So it's kind of like get him while you can.
Right.
He's going
Exactly.
to rise in our rankings, and we already have him above everybody else. We're ahead of the curve because we were able to adjust ours before shooting this, whereas others just kind of wait for
Every,
others to
yeah. Every
reflect. But
Wednesday,
I
basically.
mean,
Yeah.
even you look at I know this is a redraft video, but DraftKings Underdog, our most recent ranking, which we updated on Monday, he was 131 and 124, and
Hmm.
he is already at 110 on both now.
Right.
So that's how much he's rising, and it's going to reflect that in your redraft leagues as well.
Right. And the only thing that worries me about him is like he's just a smaller guy. So can he take those 300 plus rushing seasons? Maybe. I mean, I don't see why he couldn't, at least as a sophomore in the NFL. So
Stylistically,
yeah.
I would like to view this as a poor man's version of Atlanta's backfield last year, and him being the Bijan role. Not saying he has Bijan talent or upside,
Right. Of course.
but just saying that Bijan didn't get 50% of the snaps last year, and yet he was still RB 12 to end the regular leagues, and then 8 because he had a great week 18, which
Right.
nobody that should be finishing their leagues in week 18. But that's besides the point. Um, I'm just saying he has RB2 upside, and he's going as a RB3 right now,
Hmm.
and I just can't really get off that right now, especially in a good offense on a good team. Yeah, we're all in.
Yep. And then the next guy, first quarterback on the list, I think he might be the only quarterback, is Trevor Lawrence. We're just a lot higher on Trevor, I think, than the consensus is. Some reason the consensus is thinking that he's a bottom half quarterback, and to us, that's just not the case. So we see him being a top half quarterback. We have him at QB 12. If he was QB 12 through 15, I don't think I'm mad at you, but it's kind of far to think that ESPN has him at 155th and quarterback 19.
Yeah, I mean, he had a down year. There is no denying that. This is a little bit of a leap of faith. But again, usually you want to go against the grain with what others are doing. A lot of people have recency bias. Zach Moss, ignore what he did the first 3-4 years of his career. He had a good month when JT was out in September.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to draft him in the 7th round. Trevor Lawrence had a bad season, yes, but he is still young. They improved their receiving core, and it should be better because his talent is so much better than being, QB 20
Right.
in redraft leagues. And I think with QBs in general, they're much higher up on redraft because you want to have an elite one, similar to tight end, because you're only starting one. You don't want to have to every week. Oh, both are in good matchups. Somebody can go for 30. I hope I picked the right one because I've been in that situation. And it's annoying as hell when you have to just make decisions every week, because more often than not, it's just like you have your bench scoring more than your starters with
Right.
certain spots. And so with him, he's actually lower than in DraftKings and Underdog. And the reason behind that is because, he's not one of the top 12 quarterbacks. And so, everybody that's getting Mahomes or Lamar, you're going to take him way, way late because I'm never going to start Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
Well, what I'm saying is, if you miss out on those guys, because Anthony Richardson's in the 4th round right now, and CJ Stroud, we'll talk about some of those guys on our hate video. Essentially, if you miss out on that tier and you have to settle for like a Joe Burrow or a Caleb Williams or a Dak Prescott, somebody that could be volatile, or it's just much lower and you just kind of want some depth behind that if they go down with injury or just not playing well, I think he's the perfect guy to step in going in the 12th, 13th rounds right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just kind of our premise behind him.
Yeah, and then quick tidbit about him: he was QB 13 last year. So it's not like we're pushing him.
Yeah.
Like even in his 16 games, he didn't play the whole year. I actually have this filtered to all 18 games, all to 18 weeks. Sorry, so 17 games. He, was QB 13. So don't overthink
And
it a
then
little
in
bit.
the year before,
He was,
he didn't
yeah.
even have a great season, and he was still QB7.
Mm-hmm.
So that's and that wasn't even his best season that I think he'll have in his career, but it's kind of a floor of what he should become,
Right.
unless he either gets in his own way or Jacksonville just does not build around him like he should. But for now, he's got a good offensive coach, good weapons
Mm-hmm.
all around. We've been drafting a ton of Jacksonville all summer,
Yep.
and we're just going to continue to do that, especially in redraft right now.
Yep. And then the next guy on the list is Curtis Samuel. I feel like we're going to have a lot of Buffalo players on the list because truly ADPs haven't reflected their opportunity share. Curtis Samuel, in my opinion, is the best receiver currently. I think that Keon Coleman mid to late into the year could be better, but currently at the beginning of the year, Curtis Samuel is the best receiver on that offense, in my opinion. And if you look at our ADP versus everybody else's, this is a wide receiver friendly ADP, of course, but 97th in. So we're wide receiver 49, just like Yahoo, but we're 15 spots ahead of that. So
yeah, and again, our ranking is basically on par with what Best Ball has right now, which is they're seeing every day that, oh yeah, he's running a lot with the ones. They're moving him everywhere.
he's
He's
the running
lined up
back.
in the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he's reunited with his former OC in Carolina, where his career best year when he had 30 plus carries and then opportunities after opportunities, and he finished as a wide receiver too. Well, now he's there with even more opportunity, with a better quarterback. It is not Teddy Bridgewater. It is Josh Allen, who's
Yep.
been QB1 or 2 each of the last 4 years. We're just really high on him. And again, I understand why his rankings are as low as they are on these redraft platforms. But at the same time, you know, again, get him while you can, because I don't expect ESPN to have him as 143 and borderline undrafted
No way.
much longer.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he has the upside to be your weekly flex,
Mm-hmm.
and you're getting him as your wide receiver 5 or 6 right now.
Yep.
It just makes too much sense. You want to get good players and good offenses, and that's exactly what this is. Good upside, good opportunity. He's poor man's Debo. That's just kind of what we're going to view him as, and he's just going to, we're going to feel good about our investment in him.
Yeah, and especially in best ball. And then next guys on the list are the tandem out of the Green Bay Packers. In our rankings, like we have a group of wide receivers that are just kind of, there's a ton of them in one tier. Both of these guys are in that tier, but of course, one of them is wide receiver 32, one of them's wide receiver 40. So there's a little bit of a gap in like the ranking, but we don't necessarily see a huge gap in like the expectations or the talent. It's more so there's more question marks on the Christian Watson side versus the Jaden Reed side. He was pretty damn good all year last year,
Yeah, and this isn't reflecting kind of position wise, like him said, these wide receiver rankings are kind of right on par with where we have both of them. But the difference is just they're going much lower. I think partially because of uncertainty in Green Bay, but it's just like you got a reasonable schedule to end the year. And if Jordan Love's going to be as hyped as he is, because what is his ADP?
It's in the 90s, I feel like, right?
72, 76. So it's even higher than in best ball. So you're going to have a 6th, 7th round pick, and you're just going to be able to also get his top 2 options in the 8th round. And it's just like that makes sense to me. Obviously Jaden Reed's a little bit higher. And I used to, be on board with just kind of completely Reed should be the guy. But again, I can't get over the fact that dropping 40 on Dallas, he had 0 targets.
Yep.
And he was their leading receiver. So they're going to mix it up. It's going to be kind of frustrating trying to predict weeks, which that's why it reflects in best ball. Their ADPs are much higher. And then also, they're probably more suited because you don't know when their 20-point weeks are going to come.
Right.
But we like them both. They're going at discounts, and we just had to pair them both because, and then even if you don't like them, Romeo Doubs and Dontavius Wicks, both reasonable as well. So pick your favorite Green Bay receiver, and you'll probably get them at a discount wherever they're going.
Everybody's at a discount right now because of schedule, probably a little bit, and then also are they actually as good as they were this last year? So, and then the next guy, we've talked about him a lot, so we'll probably speed through this one. But Jaxon Smith-Njigba, he's just going too low. We have him at 63rd and wide receiver 34, and he's just so low in other platforms, right around 100 everywhere. So we just expect him to do a lot better than 100. That's not really a good example or representation of his abilities and the new offense and all these other outlying things that are actually boosting him as a second year guy, older Tyler Lockett. So yeah.
Right. Mainly with him, again, can't reiterate it enough. He went to the worst situation possible for him to produce as a rookie, and he was wide receiver 48, and that's where he's being drafted right now.
Hmm.
Again, I just kind of view it as Tyler Lockett was wide receiver 32 last year. He is now 32 going on 33. Just flip their production, and that's probably a reasonable prediction about 75 catches, 900 yards, 5 touchdowns, and that's going to be a flex play every week. And I don't know if he'll develop into. He has the upside to develop into just every week, just plug him in, but he'll be enough to where in good matchups, I feel comfortable
Hmm.
with just investing in him and letting him get you your 14-point upside. Obviously, he's more of a PPR play
Right.
than half. Completely understand that regard, but we just like him a lot, and we'll just continue to draft him and talk about him throughout the rest of the draft season.
Yeah. And then next guy on the list is Christian Kirk, another wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, the trend here is just wide receiver heavy because we just don't think that ADPs have caught up on the other sites. Christian Kirk, we talked about his quarterback earlier. He's just still a little too low. I mean, at the same time, like he's wide receiver 31, but and Yahoo and Sleeper, but their ADPs are a little lower. So ESPN is a little crazy. So if you're playing ESPN, please get him in the
What are you doing?
6th, 7th round because you can, and run into the sunset.
Yeah, I believe they have one of the easiest strengths of schedule in terms of wide receivers this year, and they're going about 2 rounds, and even with ESPN 4 rounds different than where we have him. We think he's a reasonable flex every single week. He will by default be getting 8 targets
Mm-hmm.
on most weeks, and we've seen 10 catch weeks from him, multiple with Trevor Lawrence. So when he's going, and so he'll win you some weeks, he'll win you some games, and I just think that his connection with Trevor cannot be ignored, and that's why both he and Brian Thomas are on, because Jacksonville just as a whole, other than Travis Etienne, is just going at a pretty good discount.
Mm-hmm.
And again, whether you believe in deep leagues, Gabe Davis, sure, whatever, but Brian Thomas has over the top upside, and Christian Kirk has such a good floor as a slot receiver that it's just like I'm going to continue drafting him at these ADPs.
Yep. And then the next guys on the list is the mid-round tight ends. The 4 that we kind of picked out: Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, and Kyle Pitts. All of those guys, they just haven't reflected on their ADPs yet. I don't know that they will. Sleeper is the only one that's really good about this, but Dalton Kincaid should not be a 7th, 8th rounder, and that's just what's happening right now. So all 4 of these guys should be drafted in the 5th, 6th round, and we're just not seeing that necessarily on these other platforms.
Yeah, so if you've paid attention to our best ball videos that we've done, we've kind of stressed that we just love getting to guys like Kincaid, McBride, Andrews, and Pitts because, Laporta and Kelsey are going in the late 3rd round, early 4th round, and they're going in the 5th round. And it's just a perfect range where the receivers just kind of drop off after that. And you could just nail one of your tight ends and then only have to draft one more, and you'll be set in your 20 team or 20 player best ball team. Well, in redraft, the gap's even wider. Like both Laporta and Kelsey are going at the 2-3 turn. Some have both of them in the 2nd round, and some it's just kind of right at the very early part of the 3rd. And Kincaid and McBride and Andrews, and then even Pitts, we wanted to include him, even though he's not in the same probably tier as the other 3.
Right.
They're just much further. The gap is much wider. So that's why we want to just kind of emphasize, because when you're starting one tight end, it's pretty annoying when you're just like have a Cole Kmet and a Dalton Schultz, and you just have to guess who's going to catch the touchdown that week. Well, all of these guys should have the floor to just be your starter every week. And in redraft leagues, you could probably get away with just drafting one tight end
Mm-hmm.
and just be set
Right.
and draft 6 receivers or 5 running backs. Because really that's what the optimal strategy is to do, is to get a reliable quarterback, reliable tight end, and then just be set at those spots, and if somebody goes down, somebody on the waiver wire.
Right, exactly.
That's just kind of the premise. We want to group these guys together because, again, the gap is just too wide. That doesn't mean that we think for sure these guys will finish above Kelsey and Laporta, but I think the gap should be much, much closer to where it's a round different instead of 3-round difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty insane for some of these guys to be so low. And then, like you said, Kelsey and Laporta, the name value is pushing them up on other platforms because most people that watch this stuff, like, and do best ball with us, like they've been drafting a lot and they're not considered casuals. Like they've been drafting. They know like kind of trends to drafts. Most of the casuals are starting to come into best ball, which means that they are trying to get back into the drafting groove, and so they're a little bit behind on these trends, and it's reflecting in basic drafts.
And then one more point before we did move on, I also want to reiterate: yes, Laporta and Kelsey are on great offenses. There's a lot of target competition as well, so I don't know if there's as much of a floor, as it really is perceived. Because if you're drafting a tight end in the second round, like we were accustomed to with Kelsey in his prime, or even Gronk back in the
Right,
day,
absolutely.
like you need a floor of 15 to make it worth being a second round pick. And well, now Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown, and Rashee Rice is such a trio that, and then Pacheco is going to get a ton of touches. Kelsey's also older. He could be getting 7-8 targets a game, which is a lot, but it's much lower than we've seen before. And he could be just getting you 13 a week, which is fine, but not at cost. Sam Laporta, again, Amon-Ra St. Brown, first round pick. Jahmyr Gibbs, first round pick, borderline. And you also have David Montgomery, who's a goal line hog. Jameson Williams, there's a lot of hype on that he could finally live up to billing. Sam Laporta is, other than Amon-Ra, I say is the safest player in that offense overall, but he's going as tight end 1. And then these other guys, you got Dalton Kincaid, basically no competition for targets. He could be the number 1 in that offense. Mark Andrews certainly could be the number 1 in that offense. We've seen before. Kyle Pitts has the upside to be the number 1 in the offense. We're not going to just break away with that because, again, he has had a frustrating couple years. But Kirk Cousins, since he got TJ Hawkinson, he was tight end 1 overall in points and points per game thrown to him.
14.6.
And then Trey McBride, obviously Marvin Harrison comes in. But other than that, there's nobody else in Arizona from the pass catching perspective. So a lot less competition for targets, way less of an investment. It just makes a lot of sense. And that's just kind of the strategy that we're building around this year.
Yeah, it looks so. Last year was a down year for tight ends. Kelsey had 14.6 fantasy points per game. TJ Hawkinson had 14.6, and then Laporta had 14.1. Of course, Laporta finished as tight end 1 because of the fact that Kelsey and Hawkinson got injured. But it kind of makes sense that, it shouldn't be such a big gap when you're thinking about these other guys between 4 and 7, 8 have 12.5 upside. So it's the same realm. 3 rounds is a lot, especially when you could get other players in that range that we like. Next guy on our list is Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen actually, if I'm correct, had the most fantasy points per game last season, or third most fantasy points per game last season at 21.5. Most people are worried about his age and his injury history, but you can't play scared, I guess is my best way of putting it. Like, you can't play based on the fact that he might get hurt. When he's on the field, he is by far one of the best wide receivers in football, and he was wide receiver 8 at the end of the year last year. And we're ranking him at wide receiver 30, wide receiver 32, and that's just, I mean, yeah, he fell a little bit because of the new offense, but that's a big drop, guys.
Yeah, and with him, he's done nothing wrong other than age to warrant a drop in ADP. Just because he's coming in with Caleb Williams now, that doesn't mean that, he's only going to get about 700 yards. And even if he does, it's going to be because he gets hurt and misses a month. But yet he still, points per game wise, is going to still be in the 13 to 15 range in my estimation, as long as his touchdowns remain reasonable, which they did have an uptick once Justin Herbert came into the field. He was always like a 4 touchdown a game guy. And then now he's sharing the field with DJ Moore. Breakout career year. No denying that. But also DJ Moore, even though he's been a floor of 1,000 yards kind of receiver. Last year was his first that he really truly erupted from the ceiling, and he had no competition. His wide receiver 2 in that offense was Darnell Mooney,
Mm-hmm.
and he had less than 500 yards. So now you have Roma Dunze and Keenan Allen coming in, and DeAndre Swift, who's a pass catcher. Even if we don't love him, he still will take away targets. And you're expecting me to draft him 2 rounds earlier than Keenan in a PPR league? No, sir.
Mm-mm.
Not what I'm doing. Again, injuries are a thing, and we're banking on a 30-year-old receiver still having one last run. This isn't a for long thing, but it's kind of one last stand before we think it really truly kind of flips. Maybe I would project or anticipate next year, whatever Roma Dunte's production is this year and Keenan Allen's this year, they'll flip next year. Kind
Right.
of similar to what I said about Jason and Tyler Lockett. That's kind of how I'm anticipating this offense going. It's going to be good enough to have an easy schedule, very reasonable, and he should be a safe wide receiver 2 that you can maybe even get as a wide receiver 4 right now.
Right. Exactly. And then the next guy on the list, DeVonta Smith, a guy that I don't know. I think we're forgetting that he's good at football, and that he outscored AJ Brown in the second half of the year last year, and these types of things. I mean, he still had 81 catches for over 1,000 yards. Wide receiver 19, and we have him at wide receiver 18, and that's like saying he's in his fourth year, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Contract year, kind of weird because he was a
Well,
first rounder, so
he
he
already
gets.
got extended, but
Oh, that's right. No, I'm tripping. You're right. But yeah, so like if you look at it, like he's going to be better every year. He's only 25, 26 years old. I'd expect him to just continuously get better, and we're projecting him to go at wide receiver 24 based on probably other guys that we're expecting to get better too. But like, I'm more comfortable with him in a good offense.
I mean, again, he was obviously former Heisman winner. That doesn't always correlate to NFL production, but
Right.
he was a slender receiver that I didn't know how to project because he was kind of a one of a kind with his, frame and play style that I didn't know if he was capable of being a wide receiver 1 in an offense. But in spite of his slender frame, he has really shined, and you know his play is just phenomenal, and he has probably the most competition for touches of any other like real skill player. You have Saquon Barkley, who's always been a 300 plus target touch guy. You got AJ Brown, second straight year he's going in the first round. But guess what? Weeks 8 through 17 last year, 10-week sample size. DeVonta Smith, wide receiver 9,
Mm-hmm.
overall 16 points a game, 6 spots higher than AJ Brown,
Yep.
which I'm not saying that he should be ahead of AJ Brown. Last year, I actually called, hey, I'm putting DeVonta Smith above AJ Brown. And to an extent, I was correct based on the second half of the production. If you had DeVonta Smith last year, he outproduced AJ Brown. So it was right with my theory. But yet I'm not saying that he should be above AJ Brown in redraft or ADP right now, but he should be much closer than being
Right.
a fourth round pick or
Yeah.
even fifth round on ESPN.
Yeah. So I mean, I can understand, the third round pick idea for him. I'm having a hard time understanding the fourth, fifth round pick idea because, like, when you think about it, like you said, AJ Brown versus DeVonta Smith, just numbers wise. Well, AJ Brown's like ranked 9th, 10th on everybody's board. And then you have a guy that wasn't worse in not much worse, right? Like overall numbers, yes, like he was down compared to AJ Brown. AJ Brown was very good. But like you said, second half of the year, he took a huge step forward, and we're still just discounting him at 30 pick difference, and I just don't get it.
What I'll say is, and this isn't a raw points or even points per game thing, but I think that between DeVonta Smith, Saquon, and AJ Brown, DeVonta Smith is the safest bet to return investment on where you're drafting him right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Because right now, Saquon, he's in the second round in basically everything, but even in ESPN, he's flirting with being a first round pick. He's right where Jahmyr Gibbs kind of is everywhere. AJ Brown is basically consensus late first round pick everywhere you go, and you get him in the late fourth or the fifth.
Right, exactly.
So I'm not saying that he will outproduce both of them or even one of them, but I will say that he will return investment for you as a wide receiver 3 much more than either of those guys as a wide receiver or running back 1 for your team.
Right. And then the final grouping, we have Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins. Um, Actually, both of these guys are very close in everything, and that's why I kind of want to talk about them. We're out on the Tank Dell idea right now because of the fact that, when you bring Stephon Diggs in, you don't expect him to be just the number 3 overall player on the offense, number 3 option. Um, so it's hard to see a path for him. But with these two guys, Nico is truly capable of doing things in the red zone that they need in this offense. And then Stephon Diggs is a target hog. We've seen it in Buffalo, and we're just on the train that, both of these guys could be really good. I think they're both second rounders, most likely. And I don't think that we need to overthink it, basically.
Yeah, so we have, and we're probably the only platform that has this, but we actually have Stephon Diggs over both Nico and Tank Dell in terms of ranking. I don't feel great about that. However, I do feel good based on ADP for both of these guys, especially in redraft when you have a projected what what's the floor, 26 points a game this year with this offense. I mean, it really kind of broke out later in the season, but they added Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs. They should be flirting with being a top 3 points per game offense, especially with Bobby Slowick staying as the OC. Essentially, this is one last stand. I don't have even confidence Diggs will be with the Texans past this year, but everybody wants to discount him based on his finish to the year last year. It was atrocious. Again, we were on that. We were staying away because of the strength of schedule that he had to face to end
Right.
the season, and we were trying to differentiate between, hey, do I pick AJ Brown or CD Lamb or Stephon Diggs? Well, CD's got an easy schedule. Stephon Diggs doesn't. We're gonna pick CD Lamb. How did that work out? It was one of our best calls. And we're on the opposite end this year because Houston, it's not an easy schedule, but they are one of the best teams in the league. It should be one of the highest and fastest paced offenses. There's upside for volume, and both of them are going outside the first 2 rounds.
Right.
I think at least one needs to be in the first 2, which in Underdog and DraftKings, that's Nico Collins. Completely fine with that. But right now, both of them are going outside that. Tank Dell is going easier. It's a little bit lower, but he's still, you have to take him as a wide receiver 2 or 3 on your team, and he's the wide receiver 3 on his own team. And I know his end of the season was rough, but through 10 weeks last year, he was averaging 20 points a game.
Right.
One of 6 receivers to do that.
Yeah.
I am going to just bank on him getting 15.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And I will say, too, this last year, points per game wise, the new Houston Texans had all 3 guys in the top 19 players. Someone has to get worse, right? And someone has to take over as the number 1 option. We just know that when it comes to Nico, he's not necessarily like the target guy. 109 targets last year to 160 targets for Stephon Diggs. Of course, in an offense with Josh Allen. Josh Allen was looking for him on every play, but still, like 160 targets is still just an insane amount of targets. So it's just one of those things where I just feel that Stephon Diggs has more opportunity for targets, especially against Tank Dell. And then he still has touchdown upside. I don't want to discount that. Like, he's still a good route runner in the red zone. He's still capable of doing those things. I don't know that he'll have the 8 touchdowns that he had last year, but I don't see why that would be impossible.
Yeah, and again with Tank Dell, I think it helped him missing last year because he really didn't have any floor games. And obviously, Houston coming into the year, we had no expectations. Every skill player other than Dameon Pierce, who did not pan out, was going outside the first 10 rounds. And CJ Stroud was going as a QB2, QB3. So if you invest in Houston at all, you won a lot of money last year.
Yeah.
Well, Tank Dell by default was going to get a role. It was either him or John Mechie, and you were in on Tank Dell, and you were correct on that. But because of the lack of other competition for targets, he was just walking into a 7-8 target a game role,
Mm-hmm.
and he just didn't have the floor game of, oh, he only had 2 for 22, like we would expect a rookie that is small, that is not a wide receiver one to do.
Mm-hmm.
And because he missed the final 5 weeks, his points per game is up. We remember him as like 6 for 100 and a touchdown and those things. But if he had, instead of that 5 week stretch, say it was a 4 for 40, 3 or 4 games, and his 80 or his points per game just plummeted, he would not be going as high as you are. But with Stephon Diggs, say he got hurt after week 10, and oh yeah, he was 20 points a game last year, and he just got hurt. So he would be a early second round pick at
Right.
worst
Absolutely.
going into the situation. That's just kind of how I view it. Again, we're different on that, but we're going to take the stand. And both Nico and Stephon Diggs are worth investing in as a wide receiver two on your redraft team.
Yep. And then that is the end of our ADPs we love for redraft. If y'all like the video, please go like, comment, subscribe. Tell us who y'all's, biggest loves are for ADP. Of course, we had tons of options we could have picked from, but these are the guys that stood out the most based on differences, of course, between our rankings and others' rankings, who we thought was just discounted the best. And yeah, so please go like, comment, subscribe, like I said, and get in there. So
Yeah, we appreciate you guys. Can't thank you enough. What I want to know is, we don't have a ton of running backs that we love based on ADP. Obviously, we're more inclined to be a PPR because it is PPR ranking, and receivers are just going to vault up in our minds and ideas. So running back is kind of overvalued in redraft based on where we have them overall ranking. Who are some of the guys that you're just like, I can't get enough of in the middle rounds? I'm not talking about your first or second round pick. I'm saying in the fourth, fifth round, whether the Kenneth Walker and the Rashad White and the James Cook of the world are going. Who is the guy that you just can't get enough of, and who's going to be a part of your team come September? I really want to know that. Check out other videos and content we have. We're going to have our hates video coming out soon. Do a ranking update for a 2.0, and then have a 3.0 in a couple weeks as well. Preseason's among us. We're having news every day come out. It's exciting. It's fun. It's peak fantasy football season, baby. So
yep.
just keep staying in tune, and we'll see y'all on the next one.
Yep. Appreciate it. We'll see y'all next time.